That's literally how I got into the NFL. I was just right place, right time as far as getting my MBA, where there was this inflection of knowledge, thought leadership, and technology that was starting to hit professional sports. I ended up running into the assistant general manager for the San Diego Chargers. He kind of leans across the table from me. He goes, "Can I ask you a question?" And I'm like,
Steve Gera is the US ambassador at FC Barcelona, board member and senior advisor, co-founder. At BreakAway Data, president of Grand Slam Track, and co-founder and chief executive of Gaines Group. He helps sports organizations create new ventures around existing properties, unlocking value and scaling globally through innovation, strategy, and data-driven solutions.
Do you want to talk to us a little bit about how much the current AI wave, how AI can help?
AI will be very, very helpful on the output front once it's properly trained from an input front. But the inputs are probably still going to be companies who are AI oriented, but still like sports specific. And the truth is, firing Claude at an athlete data problem, it's like,
Great. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Steve Gera, one of the most fascinating executives in the world of sports, if you ask me. His background is so different and so fascinating. I mean, he started in a US Marine, he then went on to become an NFL coach, and then he's been spending time advising clubs, leagues, and investors, like Barcelona, Grand Slam Track, and has built, his own practice as executive investor advisor in the world of sports. And so thank you very much for joining us today, Steve. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I'm really excited to be chatting with you today. And it's great that it's being recorded too. And hopefully some people out there get something from it. But it's great to see you and great to have this chat.
Thank you, Steve. So, to start with, your career path, as I was trying and obviously not doing the right justice, is everything but traditional. Why don't you talk to us a little bit how you went from being a Marine to the business of sport?
Yeah, it's a very non-traditional background. People look me up on LinkedIn, and when they see like what my background is and the things that I've done, my LinkedIn's not even complete, right? Like I don't put everything that I do even on there. I think in one sense you could look at it and say, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But then after most people meet me, they say, oh, wow, that actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah, listen, grew up in Missouri, just right smack dab, right in the middle of the United States. Grew up an enormous sports fan. It's a great sports city. And grew up playing, but I am like right in the middle of like average height, weight, everything that you could possibly imagine as far as like athletic ability goes, right? But I was always like the smart person on my sports teams. I was the captain of like pretty much every single team that I, played on growing up all the way through high school. And then going into college, I had a choice of either like going to a small school and playing sports or going to a big school and not playing sports. And so I went to the big school. But what I started to do is I actually started to I was actually a journalist. And this isn't even on my LinkedIn, but I wrote about sports for newspaper at Mizzou, which is University of Missouri is where I went to school. And I wrote about sports, right? And then I had someone at the athletic department ask me if I wanted to come in and actually start working at the athletic department. And I did. So I've always been in and around sports my entire life. But what happened to me was my career basically in sports really launched actually around 9/11. So 9/11 happened. I joined the Marine Corps 3 days after 9/11. All right. And I went and I served in the United States Marines. My father's a Marine, 3 uncles who were Marines. I'm the 5th Marine in 2 generations. And it was just something that I had to do. Right. And the reason people ask me even today, they're like, why'd you join the Marine Corps right after 9/11? And the truth is that I didn't want to wake up when I was 30 years old and regret not doing it. Right. And that lesson can now be applied. Basically, you go back and look at everything that I've chosen to do in my sports career. I work on really hard problems on a consistent basis. And the reason why I like working on hard problems and not easy problems is because I don't want to wake up when I'm 60 years old, have a lot of money, sure, but regret basically taking the easy way out and just working on layups and working on easy things, right? Easy things are for lazy people. Right. And so I love working on hard problems and I love saying yes to things. Right. So I spent 5 years in the Marine Corps, deployed to Iraq, came back and had a choice of either staying in the Marine Corps, going out and starting a new career. I actually was headhunted by a couple of different startups in Silicon Valley. But at the same time, I had a friend of mine who was starting a sports MBA program at San Diego State. And so I could have gone and worked for a high growth startup in Silicon Valley, probably made more money. But I had the opportunity to then go scratch this itch of going back to my roots of the love of sport. And so I took it, right? And so, gave up high paying job in order to go and get an MBA And during the process of getting my MBA, the thing that was really interesting was I ended up running into the assistant general manager for the San Diego Chargers. This is back when the NFL's
Mhm.
Chargers team was still in San Diego. They had not moved to LA yet. So this is
Mhm.
2006. He asked me, he had just read the book Moneyball. Right. And so he asked me, like, I was literally at this dinner. I just met him like 30 minutes, into dinner. He kind of leans across the table from me. He goes, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" Like, kind of like in a hushed tone.
Yes,
I'm
yes.
like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Have you read the book Moneyball?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Because I had actually, because, for my MBA,
Yeah.
I read the book Moneyball. And he's like, "Could you come do Moneyball for us?" And I was like, "Yes, of course, I can come
Yes.
do Moneyball for
I,
you," right? So
yeah.
that was literally my start. So they hired me and I got the job with the Chargers because I was just right place, right time as far as getting my MBA in a moment where there was this inflection of knowledge and thought leadership and technology that was starting to hit professional sports in the form
Mhm.
of data analytics. All
Yes.
right. Teams were not equipped to handle it. All right. And I just happened
Some
to be
still
right.
aren't.
Some, well, many still aren't. Many still aren't. Oh God, I mean, probably 80%,
Mm,
90% still aren't.
yeah.
So listen, that's literally how I got into the NFL. I was right person,
Amazing.
right time, but I had the pedigree and I had the experience, and then I also had, this background of being a Marine. I had an MBA. And so they looked at me and they said, "Okay, he's never worked in for a professional sports team before, but he could clearly highly capable human being who could come in and build this brand new thing for us." Right. And so they hired me to do that. And that was my entry into sports, right? And then since then, like literally since then, so then I worked in the NFL for just under 10 years between and when happy to answer questions and kind of go into the details here a little more. But I worked for the Chargers. Then I went to the Browns. I was the first head of innovation in North American sports, as far as I know of. Right, I don't
Hmm.
get any credit for this whatsoever, and I don't care about credit. But
Yeah.
I was a head of innovation for the Cleveland Browns back in 2013, right? And 2013-14 was when teams were just starting to scratch the surface of like what the definition of innovation even was, right?
Hmm.
And when you think about like everything that's happened from social media to data analytics to sports science to sports betting and everything, and all the technology companies that have been built off the back of sports IP rights holders. I was just right person, again, right person, right time, where I understood how the technology and innovation ecosystem and economy affected sports. And so I was elevated to this position with the Browns, but I was actually only there for 18 months because it is still the Browns. And so I ended up leaving the Browns. And then that's when I started my career in entrepreneurship. Consulted for another NFL team for a couple of years. And then went and started founding companies and started building with investors and builders, everyone from having my own venture cap firm called Hickory Ventures a couple of years ago, Hickory VC, to working with Elysian Park Ventures, who I know you've worked with closely over the corporate as an operating partner
Hmm.
for the last couple of years, to starting new sports IP properties and building a number of different companies over the years. So yeah, I've had a very wild, very varied career, but it's all predicated on really like two core things: saying yes to hard problems and then not wanting to wake up 10 years from now and regret not doing something.
I mean, it's quite a path, right? And I guess my immediate question though is, of course, you said you were right person, right time, but when did you realize the sport has the potential to become more than just competition on a pitch and a global business?
Oh God, I mean, probably, honestly, probably when I was a kid growing up in St. Louis, like, sports is like the most important thing of the least important things in the world, right? So like the most important things in the world are like putting food on the table for your family,
Yeah.
right? Healthcare,
Hmm.
insanely important, right? Energy industry, insanely important. You can go bifurcate and look at all the industries that are
Hmm.
actually the most important, right? And it's like healthcare, in financial industry, and then everything all the way down to like energy and beyond, right? And art. I would even say art and music. Art and music to me are actually like more important, and maybe sports can get bucketed inside of art and music in
Hmm.
some way. And I know we
I,
often do, but the truth is that like sports is like one of the most unifying things, and it's just it's such a primal thing for human beings. So listen, I think that's part of the reason why I always wanted to work in sports, and why I was always around it, and always doing something inside of it, even when I was in the Marine Corps, right? So I think I've always understood that it had the capacity and potential. Now but like becoming as big of a business as it is today, I think one of the things that I think is most interesting about sports is like people think of sports as like being very old as an industry.
Hmm.
The truth is really, really, really look at the
It's
timeline.
very young. Yeah.
So young. It's so young. It's so young.
Yeah.
We're just starting, right? I saw something the other day where we're talking about the Premier League being in like now it's mature versus being in growth.
Yeah.
I agree with that in the context of like you just look at the fundamentals and you look, but the truth is from a timescale standpoint, it's not. And the truth is the Premier League just hasn't, and most leagues just haven't like figured out how to actually shift from being a licensing business to being like a true kind of like value creation business yet.
Interesting. Do you wanna? What do you mean with that? Sorry, I mean, I guess what do you think are the biggest levers to create value in
Well,
sport?
yeah. So, I mean, yeah, listen, I think sports properties will still always take a guaranteed check or a,
Absolutely. Yeah.
just they'll take money for rights versus building a business that someone else can go build a business off of, right?
Yes.
And understandably so in some regards, because the truth is that like in order to actually like become like a true platform business, right? Where and
Hmm.
this term is totally overused and is completely butchered for the last like 5 to 6 years, right? And now you got
Yeah.
AI. Now
By all
everyone's
the bankers. By all the bankers. Like
yeah,
me.
yeah. I mean,
Our
yeah.
former.
So listen, but like a true platform business is one where like anyone can come in and build a business off of it, right? And you can't do that in sports, right? So you don't because the rights holders like they basically lock down all of their rights, marks, usage, and even how you talk about teams, right? Like I've seen, in
Hmm.
the last couple of years, you see some teams do some deals with like Discord and these other things, but like they don't really engage. Like they don't really allow fans to like really like take their highlights, repurpose them, and turn them into other things, and like generate like true user content. It's there's always this like wall between it. The reason being is because like of the brand, like no one wants to damage the brand, right? But I think like there's a value unlock like in the future for teams actually like investing into creating new businesses. This is why I love FC Barcelona so much. So FC Barcelona to me is like one of the few teams in the world that actively invests into building businesses around their existing business versus just taking a check and then abdicating all the value creation to like another entity. I think
Wow.
having worked with them over the course of the last decade, they're still doing things today that will reap enormous benefits in 10 years, but they have that sort of long-term thinking, right?
Mhm.
Where they're building businesses right now internally inside and in and around the organization, and they're doing it and people don't even really realize it. In I think 10, 15 years, some of the businesses that they've have invested into from a sweat equity standpoint, some of the businesses that they've allowed to come in and actually create off of their brand right now, in a very like, in a very measured and phased way. I think some of those businesses will have some like significant exits, and you're going to see a platform that like people are going to be like, oh, that's what they were doing. And then in 10 years, everyone will start trying to do what they're doing right now, but they'll be 10 years too late.
Well, that's quite I think it's something I can definitely subscribe to. The fact that you know I guess oftentimes owners tend to go for the guaranteed check rather than what is your opportunity. Then don't necessarily go out and decides to build innovative propositions, which I guess leads me a little bit into the next question. Right? You were talking about being the first head of innovation in the NFL, but also if I'm not mistaken, you spent a lot of time in innovation at Barcelona. Do you want to talk to a little bit about that, what you guys, have built and what surprised the most about that organization and what differentiated Barcelona to even want to think about an innovation hub?
Yeah, listen, I didn't obviously just mention them. I think when I was at the Browns, right,
Hmm.
my role as like, and I was the same, I was inside like the coaching staff, right? So my role was essentially chief of staff for the head coach, and then I was the bridge for knowledge and thought leadership between coaching, scouting, and the personnel department, and then business operations, right? So what I would do is I basically would direct traffic and help create projects and then try and drive those, across the entire organization. Because the truth is that like if innovation happens in silos inside of organizations, it's really, really
Hmm.
difficult to unlock any real value, because you do have to have buy-in. But the struggle is that the team's main mission is actually just to win games, right? And coaches are
Yes.
judged on winning games and winning games alone. GMs and technical directors are judged on the quality of the roster to win games and to win games alone, right? Whereas the business folks are basically, they're judged on how much revenue is coming in the door, right? But it's a symbiotic relationship amongst all three, right? So if you're going to create any new revenue streams, or you're going to try and create any sort of competitive advantage on the field, it's better if you actually have someone who's actually able to go talk in the boardroom as well as the locker room, right? And that's my gift. My gift is I can talk to a CEO as easily as I can talk to a head coach. I can make them both understand what they're trying to actually tell each other, and then the program or project that needs to derive from that, right? So that was my role at the Browns, as far as like getting everything from like, our analytics product. But for the Browns, it was mainly driven around all the projects that we were doing, right? Were basically driven around how do we get the best roster in the NFL in order to actually take an organization that has habitually lost for, 3 decades now, and get them back to where, the city and the community really wants it to be.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't there long enough to actually affect any sort of change on that, clearly. But but the thing that we were doing was we were starting to integrate, coaching and some thoughts into like product creation on the business side, right? So we had a lot of success there. But it was all about like just trying to make that team better, right? Whereas like then in 2016, 17, I started working with Albert Munde, who runs the Barca Innovation Hub, and then Javier Soprano, who's the former chief strategy officer for FC Barcelona. And honestly, they brought me in to basically be kind of bring the American lens to what they were doing. But I had already been working in Spain. I'd consulted and worked with Real Madrid. I taught at a couple programs inside of Spain for the previous decade. I started doing that in 2008, 2009. So I knew Spanish culture. I understood the Spanish teams, and I understand like the special nature of them. And what's remarkable and really unique about Barcelona is, if you've never actually been to Barcelona and spent time with the club or spent time inside the city, it's really easy just to look at them and say, it's this big global brand and it's just worth a lot of money. They had Messi, they got, Lamine now, they have, Pedri now, they have all these great players, and that's what's really like driven the engine. The truth is what drives the engine for FC Barcelona is it's the most hyper local global club in the world, right? And Real Madrid is very similar, right? Where you literally have, and you can break it down into blocks, right? You can break it down into like, a 1 or 2 square mile radius around Nou Camp, where those fans are so highly concentrated, and the culture around the club is so amazingly rich that it's basically a storytelling platform.
Yes,
right?
yes. It's one of the biggest media companies in the world now, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, the media company is a symptom, or is an output of it just being a storytelling. Because even before you could distribute live, matches, globally across television, much less, into our phones, the stories and the richness of the community in the genuineness and the authentic nature of that club is really what drives it, right? And so like even today, the socios, I think it's like 90% of the socios live within like 2 miles of the stadium, right? And those are the
Incredible.
ones who are making the decisions on who, they're the ones who vote Laporta in,
Of
and like
course. Yeah.
make all the like big block decisions. And the fact that it is actually a club where you need to get community buy-in, you need to get local community buy-in to go build it, right? And the thing is that like the players that they've signed, yes, they're big players, they're great players, but if you're watching FC Barcelona, right, that culture, that local culture comes through the television, right? It comes through with the way they play, with the branding around, the jerseys and the kit and everything. The Catalan culture just oozes through everything that they do, and that's a story. So they have this longitudinal, long-term storytelling device that like it's very, very primal. And that's the heartbeat of like what they do, right? So what Barca figured out in 2017 or so was they had over the course of the previous couple decades, they built up this amazing knowledge base. And what
Hmm.
they wanted to do with that knowledge base was use that knowledge base to build companies, to have companies launch, and then to just build new ways of actually, building out European football, revenue streams, right? And so when they started organizing it, they organized it against these constraints of like we're a socio and owned club. We can't actually invest off the P&L, so we need another investor group to actually do that, but we can do sweat equity, and here's how we actually build that engine. So we did all the engineering around like the vehicle for it, but it all comes back to like what they were really doing was exporting their knowledge and giving it out to people freely, right? As a way to then go capture value in companies, and then go help them build. And they've already had a few exits. Like their very first company was a wearables company called Wemu. And
Okay.
that Wemu ended up selling to Huddle here in the United States.
Oh,
It actually had an acquisition. So like their very first startup, they got acquired, right?
wow. Okay. I didn't
Um,
realize.
yeah, and then and this is the thing, no one realizes
No
it.
one realized. Yeah, yeah. I
No
didn't
one
know about
realizes it.
this. Yeah.
They had it. They have they you know they did deals with a number of different really remarkable companies like Pixelot at a very early
Hmm.
stage, and that's a great company. And they've got a number of companies in their portfolio now, that I actually think are going to be even bigger than these. And what they've
Hmm.
done is they've basically just tested this out over the last couple of years, and now they have this really rich portfolio of companies, who are helping drive better outcomes at the club, but then also learn like solve a problem for the club, but then are able to go out into larger markets and go attack those markets, with the backing of Barca. So for them, they just started to play like a different game, which is we have this amazing knowledge base set. How do we export that to the world? And then let's just create an engine for it. So that's how I got involved with them. And I've been working with them ever since. And it really is a remarkable kind of engine. But it comes back to just it doesn't work without that through line of culture and story, for the club being that super
Hmm.
hyper local global club.
Okay, well, look, I mean, you have so much passion. It really exudes from this conversation. But I guess, we're talking a little bit about data technology. And one of the things also I know you have done is co-founded BreakAway Data, right? Do you want to talk to us a little bit about BreakAway, or perhaps, related to that, how much, in the current AI wave, how AI can help, the data stories, data positioning of startups, but also can be used successfully in the world of sport?
Yeah, absolutely. So Breakaway was, Breakaway started as essentially like I would say like almost like an economic opportunity zone
Hmm.
between us and Elysian Park Ventures and the Los Angeles Dodgers, right? So
That's when we met, by the way. Remember,
I know that's where we first met.
it was through
Yeah.
Nikhil and at the Vision. Yeah,
Our good friends at Nikhil and Cole and all those
yeah,
guys. So back in 2018, 19, we were operating partners inside of Elysian Park, and we were helping run the Global Sports Venture Studio, right? And if you remember the Global
hmm,
Sports Venture Studio, what
yes.
that was it was essentially a collection of Adidas, UEFA, um, NHL, MLS, number of different like just portfolio rights holders or brands who were essentially trying to figure out how to engage with the innovation economy, right? Because engaging with the innovation economy as a sports team is difficult because everyone who's hired at a sports team or hired in a sports, they all have a line item job, which is you're in charge of ticketing, you're in charge of this. So innovation's like that's their side hustle for most
Hmm.
people, right? Most people just don't actually have anyone. No, most teams don't have anyone who's just trying to create and build. So we would come in and act as like the builder for these properties. And so we were, building, projects, building companies from scratch, investing into companies, doing a lot of different activities. And we realized that there was this opportunity zone around athlete data specifically, like specifically around
Hmm.
athlete data. People have been talking about trying to monetize athlete data. Who has the rights to athlete data? Is it the league because they're paying for like the league-wide stuff? Is it the team because they're paying for the team-oriented, or is it the athlete because it's actually their biometric physiological data or the medical data, right? And the truth is that everyone's got some type of claim to it and everything else, but no one was really actually building out like infrastructure in order to go address the problem, right?
Yeah.
and allow an athlete to put all their data and information in one place. So we started Breakaway originally as kind of like a company that would go attack that, right? We had a couple different products. We had some consulting services. We have some other things. What we figured out though that there were some platforms that actually needed a place for all the players in a league to go put all their data and information. And so what the company is today works with the NBA. And every single player in the NBA and also WNBA have access to all of their medical data and all of their performance data through the Breakaway app, right? It links into the EMR system and into and the NBA was the very first league in the world to actually stand. And again, nobody knows this because this is like one of those hidden innovation things inside of sports, right? Because the best innovations in sport, no one ever like actually knows, right? Like I still like the best company that's ever the best success story in sports innovation is actually Disney Plus, right? And no one knows that.
No one knows that. Yeah.
No one knows that Disney Plus was actually a website company started by Major League Baseball, right?
Yeah.
Like no one knows that,
No,
right?
it's incredible. Yes.
So listen, so every single player in the NBA and WNBA has access to all their data through the Breakaway app. And the company is doing that for, other clients across, the sports rights holders ecosystem and has been trying to build that. The truth is though, is like the athlete data ecosystem is one because it's got basically three kind of really strong players with really strong points of view on who owns what. It's still one that's really immature. Talk about like sports being a young industry. Athlete data is a really young kind of like niche inside of a niche industry. And so Breakaway is actually in the process of also building out products for the youth ecosystem, specifically around flag football, and then a couple of other sports, girls soccer here in the United States, and having a tremendous amount of success there. But really what it is making sure that athletes have access to all their information so that they can make better choices on who to train them, how to train, where to go play, and guide their careers in a more appropriate way in a day and age where it's harder and harder to actually like kind of dig through all the noise and find signal on how you actually should be developing yourself as an athlete.
Okay, and obviously, like that's been, beginning of a big wave of investment into data and technology. But do you think that AI will create competitive advantages in the data space, or you think it's more about interpreting the data?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably more in interpreting the data more than anything else, right? I think the advent of really good, big block, LLMs, and then firing Claude and ChatGPT or any of the large LLMs right now, firing those at such a discrete problem set, such as like, look at all my, health and record data. Like it's gonna do okay from an output standpoint, but it's really it will struggle to actually organize it and to make it make sense, right? Because the taxonomies are different than what the systems have learned on. Like, okay, so just think about this for a second, right? If you in sports, there are probably 100 different ways to describe an ankle sprain.
Yeah.
But in standard healthcare, there's one way. It's an ankle sprain, right? Now, in standard healthcare, there's like 100 different ways to describe a stab wound, right? But in sports, there's only one way to describe a stab wound, right? So the sports industry has created very specific inputs because of the specificity of sports that, frankly, none of those LLMs have been trained on, right? And so they struggle with it right now. They struggle with it. So there will be this entire innovation that's going to be built out around the way that data can be processed. But I believe that like AI will be very, very helpful on the output front once it's properly trained from an input front, right? But the inputs are probably still going to be companies who are, AI oriented but still like sports specific. And the truth is like firing Claude at like an athlete data problem is kind of like firing like it's kind of like it's like throwing cotton at a hurricane, right?
Yeah.
It's just not, it's not going to make a dent just yet because of the specificity of the problem.
Switching gear a little bit, the last, I guess, couple of years or so, you've also been spending time on Grand Slam track.
Yep.
And obviously, there's been a lot of focus on new leagues, on how to build, the next IPL, Premier League, or, Formula One, whatever you want to call it. Why do you think there is so much focus from investor and executive in this space, and what lessons did you learn from working on Grand Slam track?
I think it's a time scale thing, and it's like really easy just to go back and look at the calendar. So 2016, you had UFC actually exit, right? 2017, you had F1 exit into Liberty, right? So you had an $8 billion and a $4 billion transaction basically happen over the span of like 18 months, roughly. Right. People got really excited about that. They're like, oh, wow. Right. Now what people didn't, the truth about UFC is like UFC was in enormous distress in the late 90s, early 2000s. The Fertitti brothers bought it for $2 million. 2 years before that, Senator John McCain, may he rest in peace, called UFC and MMA human cockfighting. Right. And said like blood sports shouldn't be allowed in the United States. And it was banned in like 40 of the 50 states. Right. It was persona non grata, and it was very distressed. And then the Fertitti brothers buy it for $2 million. They get Dana White involved. They have their spirit animal and the real driver, the human driver, to go make it work. And then, they hit on Ultimate Fighter from a reality standpoint, and they turned it into a storytelling platform. Right. So they turned it into a storytelling platform. Right. And then, they spent a lot of money and a lot of time over the course of the next, 14 years, really building it out in a measured way, right? And the thing that they had is they have great cost controls on their talent, very small footprint of actual television production, and like the cost controls around UFC are pretty remarkable, right? Their costs are just like, anyone who's building in sports just like looks at their cost controls, like that's amazing, right? For them to be able to spend as little as they do on their talent, to spend as little as they do on their actual event. And I'm just saying in relation, because they spend a lot of money on those things, and they are highly produced, and they are great events. It's not cheap but the cost to revenue is really amazing, right? When you just look at their financials and their P&L on that. And that took them time to figure out, and it took them time to get that right. And over the last, 2.5, 3 decades, but it's taken 3 decades. Like that's a 3-decade long success story, right? Same thing for F1. In the 80s, F1, I mean, how many times has F1 been on the verge of bankruptcy, has had a private equity firm buy it, and then they almost went bankrupt, and they had to sell it to someone else. That thing's been traded back and forth like ad nauseum, right? And even like in 14, 15, like how much were they making? Millions? Like into single digits on their television deal here in the United States, just in the, not too long ago. But then, what basically after being subsidized by big tobacco and being subsidized by, a number of different loss leaders over the last, 3 decades, then they get Liberty Media in there, and they really kind of, and it's at the inflection point of, now you can do these longitudinal stories and start treating the F1 season like basically like a mini series, and basically like a television show, as opposed to, just being a sporting event that's making money off of live ticketing, right? And I think it was both of them figuring out that they had like this storytelling, that they were storytelling devices, right? And they had these longitudinal ways to do that. That was like the key unlock. And now, so what ended up happening is they exit for $4 and $8 billion. Right. And then every single investor is like, well, we can go rebuild that. Right. So let's go find other stuff to do that with, because there's tons of sports that can actually go do that. And they're not wrong. The investors are not wrong about that. But it takes time, and it takes real capital. You can either build it really, really small and grow it over time very slowly, or you can underwrite, a big build right away. Right. And so, when Michael Johnson first founded Grand Slam Track, right, he and I engaged in a number of different conversations. We went out to market and talked to a bunch of investors. We're able to, get money committed for it. And we went out, and like, you can go through and actually go Google it and go look at all the different, things that's obviously happened to it. But, obviously the league was really 2 things, right? It was highly successful in season 1, but it was also underneath an enormous amount of financial distress because of
Hmm.
the investing climate, and then also,
Yeah.
the financial issues that the league kind of hit. It's now through a full restructuring. The restructuring process actually went effective literally last week. And we're in the process of actually raising to bring it back, right? And we're just starting that process, and we're just starting to now go back and review everything and say, okay, was cost controls really the issue? Was it like what are the like really dynamics around it? But the truth of it is that emerging sports absolutely 100% can work, whether that's women's sports, and look at all the women's sports, whether it's
Hmm.
basketball, whether it's volleyball, and beyond, that are now starting to blow up and grow and get bigger and bigger. But track, absolutely. The vision behind track is that this is like one of the world's most popular sports from a participation standpoint, and then also from an actual people. A lot of people watch sports or watch track, right? The issue is that it's really, really fragmented. It's still all over the place. And it needs to kind of be pulled together somehow. And media rights concentrated in like a very specific container. And that's what we set out to do, and it worked. The thing I will tell you is that, like, if you go look at the metrics on television, you look at the metrics on ticketing, you look at the metrics on everything that actually happened,
Hmm.
you get past the headlines and everything that kind of got published about it, it worked, right? It just wasn't sustainable because of the financial distress that the company came underneath. So it goes back to, like, investors who are investing in space. Why do they get excited about emerging sports? You got excited about emerging sports because you had these two big exits in 16 and 17. And there's so much promise there, and there really is. But investors think it's a lot easier than it really is. It is not easy. Go ask the Fertitta brothers, right? This is really, really
Definitely.
hard stuff to build these things
Yeah.
out, and it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of commitment.
Great stuff. And I agree with that. I mean, it's obviously though still an area that it is definitely seen as having a lot of opportunities. And I guess that brings me to perhaps the final topic to discuss, which is other areas of potential opportunities include the space of memorabilia and collectibles, right? You want to talk a little bit about that because I think it's obviously something that you're spending a lot of time at the moment, right?
Yeah, yeah. Listen, as one of my portfolio companies is a company I've spent a lot of time and some treasure in, is a company called The Realist, which is building out
Hmm.
an entire memorabilia platform for rights holders, right? I think
Hmm.
what always fascinates me, right, Massimo, and like this goes back to like what I said at the very beginning, is I like to
Yeah,
work on hard problems, and I also like to work on problems that like other people aren't necessarily solving, and with the same kind of approach. So you think of like rights holders have largely kind of like, a lot of their businesses have been built in partnership with other companies, right? So like think of like merchandise, official merch was not a thing until late 80s, early 90s, right? And then it slowly built. There's this amazing story of the NFL. There was a guy who actually approached the NFL and said, "You guys should be selling official jerseys." And the NFL in the early 80s said, no one's ever going to want an official jersey. That's not a thing. No one's ever going to want that. He's like, okay, well, sell me a license for it. Give me the license for it. And then I'll do it. Right. And then I'll give you like $1 million a year. And then let me go sell the jerseys, and then I'll give you a revenue. And the NFL was like, okay, fine, great. He went out, building this enormous business off of it. Right. And then at some point, the NFL clawed that right back and then went out to market and actually ended up finding a partner to go build it out. Same thing. And this is what Michael Rubin, he's an exciting entrepreneur because, he's gone out and he's actually built out like, commerce, right? E-commerce for teams did not exist. It existed, but it was fragmented and it was all over the place and no one had it really kind of locked down. And then he really figured that out for them, right? And now he's reinventing, the hobby and the card market and trading cards, right? And so I do think like collectibles, memorabilia in sports and then also not in sports is still at a very, very early stage, right? You see watch collecting
definitely.
now
Yeah.
starting to grow up, right? You see that starting to explode. And it's really like physical artifacts like from events. And what's happened is like a lot of companies have only focused like that entire industry. There's a lot of gray market and there's some black market. Then the rights holders don't really have an operating system to go build out, a proper business around that. And that's what the Realist is actually building out for its partners, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and others. So I've been spending some time and helping them out on building that out because I do believe that is like, the thing I love is like when you can look at an industry and you can still look at like parts of the industry that have not modernized at all, that are still stuck in the 90s. And like that's the part of the industry that I want to go attack. Like I've got no desire right now to go attack like the super mature parts of like the industry because that's just not fun, right? It's an easy problem. I like the hard problems. Right. I like building like hard businesses in unique, hopefully lucrative kind of like, categories. And I think like collectibles and memorabilia for even in the US, which is kind of mature market comparatively to like Europe and international. But listen, there are more than enough people across the globe who are looking to collect, a unique item, whether it's a jersey, whether it's cleats, whether it's grass clippings, because everyone, and it comes back to, kind of like the theme of some of the different things that we've talked about today, right? It's storytelling and it's fan joy. It's like, how do you use storytelling to give fans joy about the players that they love and the teams that they love? And then how do you actually build, a business that gives those fans that and a great value prop so that then the team can also make more money and can actually start driving like a better outcome, because more money for the team means better outcomes on the field. Right. And so it's just, again, it goes back to that like virtuous cycle that we were talking about earlier and getting all those, kind of pieces of the pie internally kind of put together.
Absolutely. Well, look, it is definitely a space that I think is fun to watch, right? There is so much opportunity there. And one, I guess, that we will continue to discuss in the future. Steve, I mean, this has been incredibly thoughtful discussion and so much, I think we'll continue forever. You have so much experience, much relevant experience. So I look forward to continue the conversation. Thank you very much for joining me today, and let's stay in touch.
Thank you very much, Massimo. I appreciate it. I know we just scratched the surface on a bunch of stuff today, but always happy to chat with you and hope you enjoy the rest of your day there in London.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.